one of the big
Yeah.
stories over the last couple of days has been, I think Dayton Haylett-Petty was asked whether the Wallabies side would take a knee while wearing the Indigenous jersey this weekend. He said that they'd consider it, and Nick Farr-Jones came out and said, guys, don't risk it. Don't bring politics into sport. He copped a lot of backlash for that. What are your thoughts on the whole sort of storyline over the last couple of days?
Yeah, look, I think first and foremost, I think it's unfortunately taken a bit of the shine off what it is that this week and this next game is going to be about. It's wearing a First Nations jersey to honour, all the 14 players that have played with Indigenous for our team in the future of the Wallabies. In the history of the Wallabies, but also not just the ones that have got to wear the gold jersey. It's also the people that are involved. At any level of rugby in our game from day dot with First Nations heritage. So, and then to kind of, I understand like Dane Haylett-Petty was put on the spot in a media call. Someone just came and asked him out of the blue, would you consider it? And I think on the spot, he just sort of thought, you know what? Yeah, I mean, sure, it's a conversation that we probably should have and we will have just to make sure that everyone's view and opinion on this is heard. But further than that, I think it was probably just something that was taken out of context thereafter by, some misleading headlines or whatever. And Nick Farr-Jones may or may not have read into it a little bit more than it was, thinking that the Wallabies were actually going to do it. I don't know if the Wallabies were ever going to. It's just that Dane was responding to a question that he was probably completely blindsided by, right? And he just sort of gave, I think, a really good answer to. But then some of Nick Farr-Jones's comments, like I get it, like in terms of, making sure that we still keep the supporter base engaged with the team, and something like that definitely does have the potential to divide. But I mean, if you stand for nothing, you fall for everything. And the thing I was most disappointed about with Nick Farr-Jones's comments is when he said, we as a nation don't have any problems in racial discrimination. I mean, I think that's just the most naive comment almost I've ever heard. I mean, like he honestly, like he needs to watch a documentary called The Australian Dream, which was about the Adam Goodes story, but not just Adam Goodes' story. I think just using his story as a way of telling the greater story and a really dark mark in our history about how we've treating our First Nations people. And, for someone of his stature to come out and say that in the week where we're wearing a First Nations jersey is really disappointing and so wide of the mark as well.
Is it, as a former Wallaby and as a, rugby man, is it it must be a little bit, I don't know, upsetting to have people, see this and think Nick Farr-Jones represents Australian rugby now. Like there's so much more representation in Australian rugby now than when he was playing. Yeah,
I mean, look, it's unfortunate because obviously when someone says things like that, it gets grabbed and it becomes this sort of like a bigger story, and we talk about it probably more than we ever should, rather than talking about the good stories of like the jersey and what it means and because I think I've said it since the first jersey came in that Curtly Beale was right behind him pushing. Is we shouldn't just have it on our jersey one game of the year. I think it should be embossed, like where it's obviously enhanced in that one game where, so the gold jersey where the artwork's in green, or this week they've got the dark green with the artwork in white, but where it really stands out. But I even think for every other test, we should also have the same design, but just in the same color as the jersey, because I think, like the First Nations people are a huge part of the fabric of us as Australians and us as who we are and where we've got to and where we still need to get to. And they should be part of the fabric of our jersey that we go out and represent. And so whilst we're making some good strides in that area, and I think the first national sporting team in Australia to wear an Indigenous jersey, I still think there's a ways to go. And obviously not just with those types of shows of support and gratitude and also identifying there's still plenty that we can do. There's obviously education right across the board, not just within rugby, but in Australia, that we can't just ignore our history. I mean, as hard as it is to accept for us as a nation, and that is our history, and we need to accept it. We need to make sure we don't revisit it, or we don't sort of turn away from it and not accept it, because there's still a long ways to go in those areas.
And I think you sort of touched on it before when you said, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for everything. You make a tough, not a tough decision, but you make a bold sort of decision to stand up or to make a stance, whether it's political or not. But
Yeah.
you're always gonna annoy or piss off a certain section of the people. But moving into the future, it could be such a great way to engage with more fans, or to when you stand up for something, people are going to latch onto that, are going to want to support you in the future.
Well, I mean, I think especially the modern day that we live in, everyone's so worried about getting everyone to like them, and then you actually end up living a pretty lonely life, right? If you're trying to get everyone to like you from all sort of sectors, like it's not possible. So long as you're true to yourself and you like yourself and you know what you stand for, then that's what's important. And I mean, it's again, I think if communicated well and people can understand why you're making the stand that you are and whatever it is that you're standing for, then it's hard to argue. If you can sit there and articulate why it is that I'm kneeling, or why I'm not kneeling, or why I'm, whatever the cause may be, if you can articulate, well, why you're doing it, and not just let other people assume or talk about it on the social media and sort of almost see it as one thing when it might actually be something completely different. But if you can articulate that and communicate it to people, and it's well thought out, and it's got basis, then sometimes it's hard to argue. You may not accept it, you may not agree with it, but sometimes if it's your opinion and I'm now aware of it, then it's hard to argue.